My name is Jordan Redfield Wade. By day, I'm a philanthropist and private investigator, but by night, I protect the people of New York City in a different way.
My name, champ, is RedWing.
As she lay dying, I promised my mother that I would fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves, and I refused to let her down. I am the defender of New York City. I am RedWing. Jared hadn't said a single word to us in about 23 hours. It had been 24 hours since Alejandro had called me, and 23 since we'd told Jared the truth. Joe and I had been at Jared's house for about an hour. While still in the office, he had pursed his lips and left. That was it. It was a few hours before we got a text saying, "Home. Now," from him. I threw on my sweatshirt that I had hanging on my coat rack. Joe picked up her laptop, and I tossed Dean the key to lock up the office. We were now sitting at the dinner table, eating Jared's serious discussion meal, which consisted of mashed potatoes, corn, and grilled beef franks. Jared cracked open a beer and sipped on it for a second. He cleared his throat and folded his hands together. He finally spoke.
Do I need to count the sheer number of felonies you committed today? And all the ones in the past 3 weeks?
There was a pause, and I got the courage finally to answer. Technically speaking, none. At all. Jared raised his eyebrow and then furrowed both brows, but I powered through. See, I completed the detective certification, which in this state allows me to research crimes and go undercover and participate in investigations.
Official investigations. Investigations that the chief of police, who is me, signs off on and assigns, which I don't remember doing. And you know good and goddamn well what the police says on vigilante justice. Your license in private detection doesn't allow you to make arrests or neutralize citizens.
See, but that's not true.
Joanna's eyes glowed and began to project the police handbook, the new Arklow detective licensure policies, and state policies regarding policing in the city of New York City, Massachusetts. Jared nearly choked on a piece of hot dog.
As you can clearly see, it does state that a vigilante is a regular citizen who takes the judicial system into their own hands to the detriment of public safety. However, United States citizens are allowed to make public citizens' arrests if a crime is committed in their presence. So, even if Jordan is acting outside of his private investigation license, he is legally covered as long as he doesn't kill the criminals, which he doesn't do. And Jordan has his license, and according to the NADL department policies, a person who receives that license can investigate cases that they are contracted to investigate, or cases that are beyond the purview of the police to solve. They are also allowed to intervene if the police are in danger.
Beyond our purview? Excuse me?
He was squeezing his fork, and his left eye was twitching with rage. Joe didn't mean it like that, Chief. Now was not the moment for me to call him Dad. With all due respect, the only case we've really been investigating has been a bit out of the ordinary, involving forces that I'm more equipped to handle and couldn't be safely handled by regular cops. I can take more of a beating, I can heal faster, and I've been training for this since I was a child. The recent rash of muggings in this one district, as well as your own shooting, which was connected directly to the criminal you took in earlier tonight, who happens to be a violent sociopath, human trafficker, and kidnapper? Without me, he would have evaded capture. He was out to harm me in any way he possibly could, and that makes it my responsibility to handle it.
Speaking of how you handled it, can you explain to me why we have a perp whose throat was partially melted with acid, and how you expect me to hold him if he can't verbally confess to the crimes?
I froze. I had forgotten about that part.
Let me guess. You didn't think of that part, did you? What did you do to his voice? What did you do to him? Can he sue you for it?
He could, in theory, except he couldn't prove it was Jordan without revealing himself and his powers, which verbally he can't do. So, now in terms of proof, you will have his verbal confession to murder and kidnapping on video from the lenses of Jordan's mask. Also, you could have a signed confession on file on your desk by tomorrow morning.
Jo blinked away her projection eyes, and Jared put a hand to his forehead.
Are we just going to ignore the fact that you're falsifying documents? Absolutely not, Jo. I'm going to have to let him walk after 48 hours. If those papers are there, I will burn them. Justice is not something you can manufacture.
Jared looked furious, and Jo looked down at the floor, ashamed. A silence hung in the room for a second.
And since when did you have these powers?
Literally this morning. I woke up with a stronger bond to technology, and my brain can link to any piece of tech in the entire world. I think it has something to do with us descending from Ada Lovelace. Tech obeys me, but it also speaks to me. All devices, including the printer upstairs, which has been out of ink for 2 months and is getting pissed. Your cell phone, who has a few text messages from a woman named Ariana. Side note, Dad. Oh, no. Oh, God. Why? Those pics you sent!
That's enough, Joanna. God, you're just like a...
There was a slight popping sound. Jared stopped speaking and his eyes went hazy for a moment. He paused and took a deep breath before standing up and slamming his palms on the table.
Look, I meant what I said. That RedWing can operate if he stays within the parameters of the law. These conversations never happened, and no one will discover my involvement in any of this. I worked too hard to get here. That's the same thing I told him when you were younger.
Jared, we would never jeopardize your job. We just realized that, with how dangerous it got today, you should know what we are doing, and what we will continue to do, because this is our city, and we must defend it. Jared, while looking down at his plate, which was now half empty, seemed to soften. It was as though he heard something in what I had said that flicked a particular switch in his brain.
I don't say this enough. But I love you kids. I literally knew this day would come. Please be careful. If anything happened to either of you.
He shuddered as he turned away from the table to clear his plate. He walked into the kitchen, and Jo and I visibly slumped over. Talking to angry Jared was scarier than trying to take down Alejandro. I looked across the table at Jo and remembered that we hadn't had a moment to discuss Blackbird. Jared came back into the room holding a letter. I opened my mouth to say something, but Jared started speaking first.
Look, I knew this day would come. I'm sorry that I couldn't tell you this before, Jordan, but I had instructions to forget the past and not to tell you until you said the magic words.
Jared handed me the letter. I picked it up and examined it. It was sealed with wax, with my family crest emblazoned on the back. It bore my name in my mother's handwriting on the front.
This is from your parents. They told me if anything happened to them, that I should give you this letter, but only when you truly show that you understood your mission, and when you reach that understanding on your own.
I smiled even though I was nervous, and opened the letter. I read through it silently, and Jo read it over my shoulder.
Dear son, our beloved Jordan, if you are reading this, your father and I have met our end. Jared has been kind enough to agree to take you in. He has helped us raise you, and you are exactly the young man we wanted you to be. And now, there are some things you need to know about New Arklow. New Arklow, Massachusetts is a zone of magic. Magic zones are places where there has been massive amounts of blood has been spilled while the name of the ancestors have been invoked. World-changing battle fought, or other moments of great significance and sacrifice. There are quite a few, but New Arklow Zone, as well as a zone of his sister city, Bayou City, Louisiana, are the most significant in the world. The full eradication of the indigenous people of the soil of New Arklow contributed to this. Bayou City had the slavery rebellion. No one truly understood these zones, but we do know they contain a direct line to almost untold power. The theory your father and I had, that if tapped into, the zone could have the power to make someone a god. This is what drew our ancestors here. Back in Arklow, Ireland, there was a council of 13 elders. They were scholars, artists, men and women of the cloth, healers, but they were also magic users. They dedicated themselves to studying the way of the Druid, magic in general, and they protected their community with the magic they learned. At the time when they were together, they were the most powerful witches in Europe, but they stayed hidden, especially from the Christians. But they could not predict what would happen if they were discovered. Another town found one elder doing solitary rituals in the woods. The entire family of the elder was wiped out in one night. Fearing for their lives and families, they conjured a ship big enough to transport the town. And in the dead of night, everyone boarded and set course for America. They landed here with only one casualty along the way, and found the remnant of the city wiped out by the plague. They felt the power in the soil. They felt the power in the soil. It was your ancestor, Thomas Wade, who was wary of the power in the soil. Nonetheless, they settled here. Where our estate stands is the very place where Thomas built this house. It was the only place that he felt was not touched by death. This was the 1700s. As you know, slavery occurred. Soon, the family who could afford to procured African slaves. Thomas refused, as he found it beastly to enslave another human. One day, when he was visiting an elder's house, he caught the eye of a beautiful woman. She was a slave in the house. Her name was Aida. They fell in love almost instantly. Thomas bought and freed her, and then they married. This was not looked on kindly by the rest of the town. They had 2 children, James and Belle. Aita was Yoruban and Taino, and arrived after being sold from Haiti, the place of her birth. As it turns out, she was a noble birth in Yoruba. She also had latent magical abilities. Thomas taught her and the children everything he knew about magic. He even taught her how to write. And together, they would write down everything they knew about magic. The council would meet regularly, and eventually they turned their sights on tapping into the power in the ground. They decided, because the zone had been made by death, that another death would bring it out. The council had excluded Thomas from this meeting. In the dead of night, they kidnapped Aida and Thomas and their 15-year-old children. They were tied up to a wooden pyre. Aida used her magic to free the children, but it was too late for her and Thomas. With their dying breath, they cast a spell that has affected our family and this town till this very day. They erased the knowledge of magic from the minds of the elders and bound our family to protect this town, declaring that our power will only strengthen as time goes on. James and Belle now are the only 2 people with usable magic in the town, but they chose not to use it. The town folks forgot about their crime. Then the Catholics came shortly after the abandonment of magic. James married a Native American woman, and they had 2 sons, Jason and Percy. Jason married Elaine Redfield, and they combined their names. We've been the Redfield Wade family ever since. Your great-grandfather built the Redfield Wayne Enterprises. It started simply as a university and soon became so much more. They became leaders in the field of research and development for medicine and technology. Your grandfather inherited the company, as did your father. You too will become CEO one day. This is how we chose to protect this city, by improving it. We must now pass this responsibility to you, but you need not to do this alone. There's a secret I never told you about your father and myself. Your father has a twin brother. His name is Isaac. The night after our wedding, your father and his brother went drinking. Terrence came home a little earlier than Isaac, who was staying with us. We did what any husband and wife might do on their honeymoon. Afterwards, Terrence sobered up a little and went to find his brother to make sure he was okay. Isaac was in the house and saw Terrence leave. Realizing he was gone, Isaac snuck into my room where I was sleeping. And well, I will not tell you what he did, but you can infer by the context. He pretended to be your father. Your father came home as he was pulling up his pants and beat him within an inch of his life. Terrence banished Isaac using magic to Bayou City. But he had an impact on me. I was pregnant with twins. You have a brother, and his name is Jeremy. Terrence knew from the feather birthmark on Jeremy's left arm that he was Isaac's son. Your birthmark was on the right. We had every intention of raising him, but one of the nurses was Isaac's wife in disguise, and she took your brother that night, and we suspected delivered him to Isaac. I was never even able to hold him. In any case, now that we are gone, you must find your brother. There is more to our story, but only the 2 of you can unlock it. Always remember that we love you. We are so proud at the man that you have become and all that you are going to be. Love, your mother, Malia Redfield Wade. P.S. Be good to Jared. We trust him with this letter and with raising you to be the best man that you could possibly be. He has always been our best friend and closest confidant. P.S.S. You should find your cousin John Martin as well. My sister was a frequent collaborator with us. And find the book and the estate and the place that we told you to always keep safe.
I sat back in my chair. I was crying heavily. I missed them so much. To hear what happened to my mother was earth-shatteringly painful, but to discover I had a brother was a revelation. I worried that this brother might harbor some resentment towards me for his forced banishment. I dabbed at my eyes with a napkin, and then it truly hit me. Blackbird and my DNA were almost a complete match. And when I saw him today, he looked almost exactly like me, right on down to the costume. Could it be true that Blackbird is my brother?
Is everything all right?
That was just difficult to read. Not a day goes by that I don't miss them.
I know. I miss them too.
Did you know, Jared? About my brother? Jared raised an eyebrow. I handed him the letter so he could read that part for himself. Before he could speak about it, Jo held up her hand.
I just got a notification. Basic B&E, but it's in a weird spot. The data storage unit in the basement of Blackburn Labs. Someone is trying to take the files. I'll slow them down, but they seem very determined. You should get there fast. Should I call in the rest of the team?
God, it is so crazy to think we have a team. We're gonna need all matching uniforms. But no, I don't think I'll need everyone for this. Besides, I'm already dressed for it. I ran upstairs to my old room, which has the fire escape. I was soon soaring through the air. I quickly reached the wreckage of Blackburn Labs, and I felt something. It felt a lot like that same vibe that I'd felt the first time I met Blackbird. Was Blackbird down in the ruins of the labs? The chemical smell from the fire was gone, but the smell of ash still penetrated every bit of my senses. I found the circular hole in the middle of the wreckage that looked like an improperly placed manhole. I gently lowered myself down into the hole and looked around. I didn't see or hear anything, but the feeling grew stronger. The room was empty except for a small laptop connected via Ethernet cables. I moved toward the laptop to try to pick it up. I reached out my hand, but I didn't reach it. I was tackled to the ground by a figure that I couldn't see. I rolled myself over onto all fours, looking up to see a figure looking back at me. We were illuminated only by the light of the laptop, but that was enough to take in some of the details. This figure was female, and tall. She was wearing a black vinyl catsuit with purple and silver detailing at the shoulders and legs, and a black domino mask with combat boots. The front of the catsuit was unzipped just low enough to show a small amount of cleavage, but not to be immodest. Her shoulder-length hair was black and shiny and pulled back into a wavy ponytail. She appeared to have skin a similar color to mine, but a little bit lighter. Her features had a distinct classic elegance to them. Her eyes were also very familiar. Did I know her? In any case, she was very beautiful, and armed with 2 retractable forearm blades, several sets of knives, and God knows what else she had on her person.
Oh, it's you!
She withdrew her blades and straightened up.
You could tell your tech ninja to stop hampering me now. We're on the same side.
I'm sorry. Who are you?
She took off her mask, which didn't really change much of anything.
You don't remember me?
No, I don't know you. So I'll ask again. Who are you?
Oh my god, duh, of course you don't remember me. I'm not like the last time you saw me, 2 years after Aunt Malia and Uncle Ted died.
I looked closer. I knew I had one cousin on my mother's side, but this couldn't be him, because when I last checked, that cousin in particular was a dorky, gangly boy. The person before me was completely and unapologetically a grown woman. Martin? John Martin Lahiri?
I mean, I go by Marilyn now, but yes.
She reached in and gave me a big hug. I returned it, but I was still so confused. Of course, but there is how and what?
Yeah, I know. Look, we don't have a lot of time right now, but here's the basics. Okay, you know how there was that shock wave that was sent over here about from this point? Well, there was a shock wave 13 years ago yesterday in Bayou City, and it changed me pretty much a lot. I mean, I would have been a trans woman anyway, but the transition was a little more, well, efficient.
I took off my mask, realizing that there was no point in wearing it at all anymore.
Anyway, I came up here for exactly 4 reasons. 1, to collect data from the shockwave, hence the laptop. 2, I need to see if the shockwave was authorized by the same person. 3, I honestly had to come up anyway for work, of course. And of course, 4, I was gonna go check on your agency tomorrow, catch up like families are supposed to do and whatnot. But now is as good a time as any for number 4. Oh, and 5. There's a person up here I have to find.
I seemed to come out of my stupor finally. That last minute made it very clear. Jean Martin was always very concise and very organized when we were little. This was a shock, for sure, but it wasn't unwelcome. It was nice to see my cousin again. I mean, I don't know if I can get the full team into the office, but you're more than welcome to crash with me and Joe tonight. Marilyn squealed with excitement, just as she had done when we were kids. And that was when I truly realized that this was my cousin, through and through.
Oh my God. It'd be so good to see her. I bet she's doing great.
She's like, essentially, well, she's the internet now.
What?
Powers.
Oh, right, a technopath. Huh. Shit, that makes so much sense.
We laughed, recognizing how apt a power that was for her. It was a blast from the past to see my cousin. About an hour and a half later, because it was still a Friday night, Marilyn, Joe, and myself were drinking and laughing it up at a bar down the street from my apartment, called Axiom. The vibe of Axiom was youthful, full of 20-somethings who were into craft beer, indie music, art history, and old novels. It was just raucous enough to be fun, but also a bit bourgeois. This place always was good for a martini or a glass of wine. I hate beer, but I'm sure if I liked it, I'd love the selection here. Axiom was a classier version of Sparklers. Marilyn had changed into a dress, and I was even more impressed with her appearance. She was wearing 5-inch black strappy heels, fingerless leather gloves with a heart-shaped cutout on the back, and a one-shoulder shimmery black sheath dress. She had that hourglass figure that had always seemed to be in fashion. She was thick in the hips, and though it was awkward to look at my cousin in this way, her curves seemed to have been maintained with a laser-like focus. She wore smoky black eyeshadow on her eyes and dark purple lipstick. Her hair fell just perfectly on her right side. She had done all of this in a matter of 15 minutes. Was she always this prepared to go partying? For all the world, she looked like a supermodel more than a superhero. I was looking pretty great as well, reprising a version of my outfit from my date with Dean 2 nights previous. Joe looked almost as riveting as Marilyn, strangely deciding to go a bit girly for that night. Marilyn had done her makeup to match hers, except she gave her a deep fuchsia lipstick with a royal blue strapless princess dress with a mesh sweetheart cutout on the upper portion of the chest. She decided to draw the line at real heels, though, and wore a pair of sneaker wedges that matched the fuchsia of her lips. We were easily the best dressed at the bar, and everybody was sneaking looks at us. I raised my glass to my companions. Ladies, you look absolutely smashing.
Cheers to that, bruh.
We laughed, and our glasses all clinked.
Marilyn, I've got to ask, have you thought of modeling?
Marilyn sipped her drink demurely.
Actually, that's the job reason why I'm in town. I had a quick cover shoot this morning.
For what magazine?
Fierce Underground.
The Fierce Underground? Girl, what? That's like the most
well-known fashion magazine in the world. And you're on the cover? Marilyn laughed and nodded. "'Cause that is so cool. What did they have you do for the shoot?" She rolled her eyes.
Honestly, it was a little strange. They were trying for the Eve and the apple type iconography. I told them I wouldn't do it unless the snake was added on later. So, be prepared for that.
We shared another little laugh. "So you said you had someone to find up here, right? Maybe I know him?"
Actually, he said something about looking for you up here. You probably already run into him. When you came into the vault, I thought you were him because I felt the presence.
I put two and two together. Blackbird. You know Blackbird. Well, this is just fantastic. I've been trying to figure out who he is, and maybe you can tell me a little bit more.
So you've seen him. He didn't tell you yet, did he?
Tell me what? Marilyn stayed silent and looked at her drink. Oh, that he's my twin brother? No. He didn't tell me that. My mom left a letter before she died. But I mean, if you have any details... She sighed, tilting her head back and draining her wine glass.
Okay, well, about 5 years ago, just after the shockwave down south, an elite task force was put together to deal with the sudden influx of superpowered humans in the city. We called ourselves the Division, made up of 6 superhumans overall. I met Blackbird that first day. I freaked out at first because I thought he was you, but we didn't really address it. I tried to keep it a secret for a while. Anyway, they gave him the code name Blackbird. We became close friends, and they gave me the code name Rook. Anyway, he told me he was an orphan and he was seeking information about his background. But he didn't have any leads until about the last 4 months. We ran into a person, retrocognition, the psychic ability to see the past, and she was able to tell us what his full story was. Back before Aunt Malia, Uncle Ter had you, more specifically, the day you were conceived, Aunt Malia had, well, did you know your dad had a twin brother named Isaac?
Yeah, I just read about that. My parents put that in the letter. What does Jeremy have to do with this?
I'm getting there. So Jeremy's last name is Field, which Isaac has been going by for the last few years. Okay, so Isaac vanished the same week your parents died. Jeremy was put into an orphanage almost immediately, and then in foster care. He had a rough time of it. But he turned out a fairly decent and hard-working guy. When the shockwave hit and our powers kicked in,
everything was clicking into place for me. Wait, does Jeremy know he's my brother?
I'll get to that. Anyway, well, we all loved him on our team until...
Marilyn paused, not sure how to continue. I didn't tell her to continue. I was still trying to process the fact that I had a twin brother that I never knew about, and that he probably knew who I was.
Well, until what?
We were on a mission. My ex-boyfriend and former nemesis Barbarian had teamed up with Kane, Dark, and Flora to biologically contaminate downtown Bayou City. My mission was to stop Dark. Hunter and Farrell were taking on Flora. Dr. Salomon was on Kane, which left Blackbird with Barbarian. Everyone finished their fight, but Barbarian brought up Jeremy's lack of family, and...
The sorrow on her face said it all. Jeremy had gone too far.
Barbarian has been in a coma for months and woke up powerless with amnesia. He didn't even recognize my face. Jeremy left that night and searched for you. He wanted answers. He watched and followed you, and I have reason to believe that he's in the area. We want him back. We all make mistakes, right? We just want our guy back, you know?
I did know what that was like. It was the same reason I was with Dean again. So Marilyn, I've been wondering this. What exactly are your powers? Are these powers Organic? Genetic? I began to realize the significance of her words about our lineage.
In our case, yes, they are. I'm a telekinetic, and I can bend light around myself and go invisible. All of which came from my mom. The shockwave gave me this body, but it also enhanced my invisibility power.
Well, I can make force fields, which I've also seen Blackbird do.
Oh, you two must be almost the same then. So your psychokinesis and shield came from your dad, Terrence Redfield Wade.
Whoa, this is pretty cool. There was a pause while we sipped our drinks. Then Marilyn bit her lip nervously and timidly added another detail.
I was wondering about you. He came over here with one real purpose, which was to find you. After that, I don't know what he was planning. I don't think he'd hurt you, but he grew up in abject poverty in Bayou City. Imagine knowing you are poor with no future at the time, no hope. I don't know if he harbors resentment towards you.
Understood? That was a fair point, but then I had another thought, and I verbalized that thought. But at this point, he's saved my life twice. If he was trying to kill me, wouldn't he have just let me die sooner? Marilyn opened her mouth to answer, but she stopped as a gunshot rang out through the bar. The bullet hit a light on the ceiling and sparks flew everywhere. Immediately I looked around for the gunman, but as I was looking, I saw that the chandelier had been hit and was falling toward a person that had fallen onto the ground. I threw up my hand and caught the chandelier in a force field right before it hit the human. With a snap, I vaporized it, turning it into a million glittering crystal specks that rained down on the saved victim's head without injuring them. I saw the thugs and looked at their eyes. They seemed to have enlarged pupils to the point where their eyes were almost all black. For a second, I wondered how they'd gotten past security, and then I realized these were the bouncer and the security guard. Joe and I rolled under the chairs, but when I looked around to find Marilyn, I couldn't see her. Where did she go? I felt someone tap me on the shoulder near where I'd been sitting. It was Marilyn. She had her hands on both Joe and my shoulders, and was whispering words I didn't recognize with her eyes closed. She opened her eyes, and they were glowing a soft purple. I felt a gentle breath of air on me, and then I felt the fabric tighten around me. When I looked down at my arms, I realized I was wearing my RedWing suit. I looked over at Joe, who was now wearing an almost identical version of my suit, except it was white with metallic blue and silver feathers, a sweetheart bodice, and a white cape skirt with silver trim over gray boots, and a black mask. She looked just as surprised as I did, but her face shifted back to serious. Joanna's eyes started glowing, and I knew she was updating the police. While I watched Marilyn, her body seemed to become hazy for a second, and when it became solid, she was in her Rook outfit from earlier.
Sorry, Joe. I hope you like this costume. I didn't really know what your color would be.
Joe didn't hear her because she was tracking the police nearby. A loudspeaker crackled. A man's voice that sounded gravely familiar came on the line.
Listen up, drinkers of Axiom. This is not a fucking game. This is not a robbery. This is not a negotiation. I need only one of you, but I'm willing to kill every one of you if you don't bring them to me. Every 3 minutes, my associates here will kill a captive. You have 10 minutes to produce the bullshit vigilante RedWing to the rooftop, or this entire building goes up in flames.
I gulped, hard. This was some truly deep shit that we were in, but I wouldn't be a good detective if I didn't come up with a plan. The chandelier helped inspire me on how to get rid of those associates really quickly. I whispered my plan to the girls, turned my voice modulator on, and grabbed the dart. I looked at the girls and saw Marilyn vanish. I assumed she was diving towards some of the hostages.
Right over here, you pig-faced losers.
The thugs turned toward me and aimed their guns at me, but Joe cut out the lights, causing them to falter. That was all the time I needed to let Marilyn clear the hostages out of the way, while I wrapped my dart around a suspended strip of lights over top of the criminals. I used 2 darts to cut the cable suspending the light, and brought it crashing down on their heads. The other lights came up, revealing 2 unconscious men on the floor. Almost immediately, Marilyn had secured them with zip ties that she had on her person. I was standing on the table, with Joe on the ground to my left, and Marilyn on my right. The hostages turned to face us. I'd imagine it was jarring for those people who'd never thought they would meet the famous RedWing. And now he had 2 accomplices. The tumult hit an all-time high. I spoke to the crowd.
Everyone, please calm down. I need everyone to follow Rook out of the building. Whitehawk, can you illuminate a path to the roof? Great. Rook, can you meet me up there when everyone's out?
You know it, RedWing. You sure about this?
Darling, I'm never sure about any of this, but I need to get this done.
Marilyn nodded in my direction before calling everyone to follow her outside. Joe's eyes glowed briefly, and then flickered back to her standard color eyes. I knew she'd still be watching and listening as I went up. I climbed up the stairs to get to the roof access door. When I reached it, I put my hands on the door. I remembered to be careful, and I put a shield around me to have myself at the ready. As soon as I opened the door, a gunshot whizzed past my head. I ducked and rolled behind the water tower. I pulled out my dart.
Whitehawk, give me the access to the cameras on the rooftop. Also, let Rook know about the guns and tell her to slow down.
She's coming up the side. Patching camera visuals to your mask now.
The visual loaded in front of my right eye. I could see 3 figures standing facing the water tank. 2 of them were clearly bodyguards, and the third was unarmed but hard to make out. I grabbed one of my darts and took a heavy, deep breath. I was about to do a move I've only ever accomplished once, because it is one of the most complicated dart maneuvers that I'd ever tried to do. I was about to do the scorpion sting. I swung the dart around my head and shot it out ahead of me, facing the opposite direction of the bodyguards. I pulled on it slightly to make the dart arc over my head. The dart cleared the edge of the water tower, and as if in slow motion, the dart angled towards the trio. It struck the hand of the guy on the right. I heard him cry out and drop the gun. I grinned and flicked the rope, bringing the dart up at an angle that happened to coincide perfectly with the guard on the left. With another flick, the dart was around the second man's neck, and I pulled him to the ground. I used a second dart, one of my regular steel throwing darts, to go through the leg of the second guard. That bodyguard fell to the ground as well, in shock and in pain. Now, using my line of sight, I noticed the 2 guns, and using a force field, I threw them to another rooftop. I jumped on top of the water tower, assuming a pose that would have been probably better if Peter Parker had done it perching on top of a car hood.
Hasn't anyone told you it's rude to shoot at the innocent?
From where I stand, you ain't so innocent.
He stood at about 6'3". He had black hair with gray on the sides. He seemed to be in the foulest of moods. I knew exactly who this was, and I was pretty sure I knew what he wanted revenge for.
Antonio Parcelli.
In the flesh. Which is more than I can say for my son. You took my son from me and took his powers away.
Now that just isn't true. He was trying to kill me, so I had no choice but to take him down. Just like I'm going to do to you.
Ah, you're a wise ass, aren't ya? Just like your parents were before I got to them. Oh, I know who you are, Jordan. I knew the minute you started fighting my men, and I got those reports on what your powers were. I'd seen them before, on the night where I had your parents taken care of. When you gave me this.
He held up his hand, which was a golden prosthetic hand. I had given him that when I was a child, when I tore apart his hand atom by atom, as the first act of the power that I possessed.
You son of a bitch.
You fought my son. Now you're gonna fight me. And I'm gonna finish what I started all those years ago.
Good fucking luck.
I dove at him, and we proceeded to grapple on the ground for a few minutes. I landed some punches to his face, his shoulder, and his side. He landed powerful blows that could have broken ribs on a regular person. He kicked me squarely in the chest at one point, and I was thrown back against the edge of the water tower. That was when I knew he had gained the upper hand on me, and I began thinking I might lose that fight.
Oh, weak, sad little shit you are. I don't know what my boy saw in you, what he envied about you.
I rose to one leg with a dart in my hand. He kicked it out of my hand, and then delivered another punch to the side of my face. I fell and tasted blood in my mouth.
All that power coursing through your veins, and you don't even know how to use it. Pathetic.
He gripped me by the throat and held me over the edge of the rooftop. I choked and gagged but couldn't wriggle out of Antonio's grip.
Your parents would be ashamed. I'm glad I killed your parents when I did, so they wouldn't see how weak you would become. How could I respect you, you weak little bitch? I respected your family for as long as I could, but they began to meddle in my affairs and killed my wife. Your mother was an honorable woman, and it brought me no pleasure having her killed. Your father, on the other hand, he was no saint, and he deserved what he got.
He stopped, mid-sentence. His eyes widened with shock as he gritted his teeth to an unseen pain. His hands loosened involuntarily, and I used that moment to slip from his grasp, catching myself on the edge, gasping for air, pulling myself back up. He turned to face behind him. I saw a throwing knife sticking out of his back and followed the trajectory. Perched atop the water tower that I had been on prior was Blackbird. It was Jeremy, my brother. His eyes were glowing a turquoise color in the dark. He was glaring venomously at Don Parcelli. The Don reached back and pulled the kunai knife out of his back. He cracked his neck and threw the blade down, where it stuck into the ground.
What's this, eh? Some kind of joke? Who the fuck are you?
I am Blackbird. Get the hell away from my brother, or I will end you.
Oh, really? Try me, boy. Bet you won't.
He didn't ever finish that sentence. It was the last thing he ever said at all. Blackbird's eyes shone like the stars in the night sky. He jumped to the ground and darted toward Don Parcelli. It took him only 2 seconds to do so, but when I realized what he was doing, it was too late. He plunged his knife deep into Don Antonio's stomach, and then he kicked it all the way through his body. The Don was thrown backwards, tripped a little, and fell off of the edge of the building. The body landed moments later with a sickening crack of the spine. However, when I looked over the edge, I didn't see a body.
Are you alright, Jordan? Did he hurt you? What the hell have you done?
He raised an eyebrow, in much the same fashion that I usually would.
I should think that would be obvious. I saw a problem, you were gonna die, so I neutralized the problem. You killed him! That's not what heroes do! We bring people to justice, but we don't become the executioner. That man That beast of a man killed our mother, your father, and you're defending him to me? This is my city. You obey my rules here. And if I don't, Jordan? Look, we need to get out of here. The cops will be here any second, and we need not be here when they get here.
I hated to admit it, but he was right. We were close to my apartment, but I figured Joanna wouldn't appreciate that very much. So I decided to take him to the estate.
Can you keep up with me? Really? Remember how I saved your ass the other day?
Oh, right. I forgot. With careful movements, I made my journey toward the RW estate with my brother. Today just keeps getting weirder and weirder. When we were about halfway there, Jeremy kicked me in the back with a blow that knocked the wind clean out of me. I landed on my front. I rolled over onto my back and looked up at him.
Jeremy, what the hell?
What the hell was his problem? His eyes looked bloodshot, and he was breathing heavily. I also recognized his stance. I identified it, and kicked myself back into a defensive fighting stance. I would be using Aikido techniques during this sparring match. I cocked my head to the side a little bit, but remained at the ready. He did not reply, but he tried to take a swipe at my face. I caught the fist and used the momentum to flip him over. While I held his fist in my grip, he spun like a top, sweeping me in the back of the knees. I fell face first, stopping myself with my other hand. He rose swiftly and grabbed the back of my neck. I rolled forward to dislodge his grip. I stood up.
Yo, Jeremy, cut it out, man. I don't want to fight you.
I truly didn't want to fight him. I actually just wanted to talk. He apparently didn't, as he tried to kick me again, but I caught his foot. He jumped with the other foot and struck me hard in the cheek. I involuntarily spat a mixture of saliva and blood from earlier. I didn't go down, however, but I was very unsettled. He jumped on my back, trying to choke me. I grabbed his arm and flipped him onto his back. I felt him lose his breath as his back hit the ground. I quickly grabbed his other arm and flipped him on his stomach to pin him down.
Jeremy, look! I know how you must feel, but for the love of God, just talk to me.
It was then that I heard the sniffling. I eased off of him and sat up. We looked each other dead in the face. Jeremy was sobbing, uncontrollable deep sobs. I slowly took his mask off, and mine as well. We really did look exactly the same. Something about that realization made my own tears start to flow down my face. Jeremy grabbed my right shoulder with his left hand. I grabbed his right shoulder with my left hand. We rose up together, and we pulled each other into a strong embrace. No words needed to be exchanged. In the embrace, I felt all his pain, and all the hurt from his existence. I felt all his jealousy and his envy at my blessed life. But I felt all of his sadness as well. All of the sadness that he could never know our mother the way I did. He felt all my joy in finding out that I wasn't the last in the line of my family. Finding that the weird feeling I'd always had that something more was out there for me, that something else was there. Finding out that that was true. He could feel my joy from that, I could tell. He felt all the familial love that I could ever bestow on another person, even if we had only just met, and I felt that from him as well. And in that embrace there were so many things said and shared without words getting in the way. The only words that were said at the end of it all were said by me. Look, you are not alone anymore. We're family. We separated, looking into each other's eyes, still gripping each other's shoulders. There was a pause during which we both tried to catch our breath from sobbing, and then Jeremy spoke.
Look, I know I shouldn't have killed him. I just wasn't about to let him get away with killing Mama and you. I understand. This is gonna be a nightmare, though. When a mafia head dies less than 24 hours after his son is institutionalized, well, mayhem follows.
I sighed and wiped the dried blood from my chin.
Alright, come on. I'll bet Joe is missing us at the house. I can't wait to formally introduce you. Are you okay with the couch for tonight? I mean, sure. Was Joe the one in the white suit? Yeah. How'd you guess? Well, the costume. It looked to be Marilyn's work. And it looked to be related to your look as well. How did she do that, by the way? That confused me a little. Magic, mon frere. Magic. Sure. But how did she know to pick out those colors? Whew. I tell you. Marilyn, she just gets people real well, you know?
I stood at the ledge.
We need to go to the estate.
Jeremy looked at me, one eyebrow raised. It was kind of like looking in a mirror.
What do you mean? What do we have to do? For one, I'm wounded and low on power. And two, Mom left a letter and said there was something there we won't see until we're both there, together.
Jeremy smirked before we both took off.
Well, lead the way, brother.
A few minutes later, after a call to Joe and Marilyn to let them know where we were, we waited for them to pull up in front of the estate's gates. Jeremy was greeted by Joe with a firm handshake at first, and then she pulled him in for a bear hug. She let him go and Marilyn hugged him as well. Then Joe held up her phone, using her power to project the image onto the stone wall. It was a blog post from our favorite society blogger, Kit. The sound was a little soft, but we could hear the newscaster talking about Don Parcelli's death. They cut to a video of Alejandro in his cell while they tried to ask him for comment. He couldn't say anything, as we knew, but we could see a tear roll down his cheek and utter rage filling his eyes. Jared came on the screen next, and we turned it up to listen.
At this time, we're uncertain what happened. It appears that Antonio jumped from the ledge intentionally. However, we cannot at this time rule out the possibility of homicide. There is no video surveillance footage of the rooftop. If you have any information regarding Antonio Parcelli's death, please contact the NACPD.
Kit Mojito came back on.
Antonio Parcelli's death is expected to generate unrest in the criminal underworld. Antonio Parcelli, as we know, has been the head of the Parcelli Mafia family since the death of his father and the merging of the Santiago and Parcelli families. And with his only heir in prison, it is possible there will be a regime change. Only time will tell.
We shut off the video. Joanna and Marilyn turned to look at Jeremy and I. I locked eyes with Jeremy and he bit his lip. Joe spoke first.
Well, good thing I erased the footage. I guess he's done then. But I thought you and I agreed, Jay. I thought you said you would never kill anybody.
Jordan didn't do it. It was me. It was self-defense. Kinda.
Only part of that was true. Jeremy had killed him, and it was possibly in self-defense, but it wasn't exactly like he had just tripped.
Well, you have to tell my father that. You should see the things he's texting me. He's pissed. Like, really pissed.
Joe bit her lip and raised an eyebrow.
I'm sorry. Just be more careful next time, okay? We can sort this mess out this time, but I don't know if we'll be so lucky next time. Shall we go in?
Jeremy nodded, thankful to be focused on the front door. We entered the estate, and almost immediately, something felt different. I felt something I had never felt before in that place, and it was pulling me in a very specific direction. I looked at Jeremy, and it was very clear that he could feel it as well. We started walking down the hall, up the stairs, and down another hallway. We decided to use a flashlight instead of turning on all the lights in every room in the estate. When we got to the end of the hall, we turned left and entered the library. This was the very place where Mom had read Sherlock Holmes stories to me when I was little. We turned on the light, illuminating the shelves. The shelves were filled to the brim with books. Books of all sizes, shapes, and colors.
What's going on?
I don't know, but I think we're supposed to be in here.
I looked around the room. I looked at the ceiling, the books, and the fireplace. One of the books caught my eye, and I moved to pull it from its shelf. It was a first edition copy of a signed collection of dark poems, The Raven and Other Signs.
I have never seen this book before, but there's a note here.
I pulled out the note and read it aloud.
Stand with your brother in the center of the library and pledge to defend the city. Love, Mom.
Jeremy and I raised an eyebrow. I never remembered Mom to be this cryptic. Looking back at it now, I understand why she hadn't just come right out and said it. It pretty much had to happen the way that it did. We looked at the floor. That was when I realized that the carpet had our family crest emblazoned on the center of it, in the center of the room. I could never remember it being there before, but I reassured myself that it probably had been. Jeremy and I positioned ourselves above our family crest, facing each other.
I pledge to defend this city.
The room began to shudder slightly. At first we thought it was an earthquake, despite that not really being a thing in our part of the world. Then we looked up and realized that it was the fireplace. The fireplace was moving. It was falling backward and pushing aside like a hidden door, revealing a small, darkly lit room. Obviously, we went in. The door shut behind us and we jumped slightly. The room was moving. We realized the room was an elevator. Facing the wall we had just walked through, we felt it move to the right and then down, what must have been about 3 levels before sliding again to the left. The door opened. I still don't think in my wildest dreams I could have imagined what we were about to find. Thank you for listening to RedWing, the audio drama podcast. RedWing is written, directed, and produced by J.V. Hampton Van Sant. That's me. The cast of RedWing includes J.V. Hampton Van Sant, Amanda Jacobson, Chris Green, Dane Shiner, Simon Weeks, Christine Osimo, Skylar Paring, John Buckley, Brittany Nicholson, Lucy Fitzgerald, Kenyon Lang, Katie Hearn Church, Nathan Foster, Atticus Jackson, Rhett Hall, and Kiara Jeter as Birdkeeper. RedWing's official musician extraordinaire is Nico from We Talk of Dreams. Additional music from Kevin MacLeod. The RedWing logo is designed by J.V. Hampton Van Sant, and official character art is from the fantastic Click Art Studios. We would like to thank the following shows for being inspirations and or being involved in the podcast itself. Wine and Crime, Crime and Color, Queen's Podcast, Brain Trust Brothers Podcast, Gravity Beard, The No Sleep Podcast, Conjuria, The Cryptid Keeper, Deliberations, Getting Off Podcast, Spirits Podcast, the entire family at Blazing Caribou Studios, and everyone in the #AudioDramaSunday family. If you would like to support the show, buy official RedWing merchandise, or if you just want to stay in touch, all of our links are in the show notes and on our website, redwingpodcast.com. Be well, stay safe, and fly high, heroes.